Hello again, another Agakala Reacts, and today we will be watching How Islam Saved Western Civilization. It's a longer video that was recommended to watch, and I watched about 23 minutes ago, 23 minutes of it 2 weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it, so obviously I'll be continuing with it. It's a talk by Dr. Roy Casagranda from the Austin School. And it's really interesting and really fun. So be watching it today, and for some reason I didn't watch it in between, but when I put the link in, it just started anew, and I remember that I was on the kind of mark of 23 minutes, so I'm just gonna start from there, and let's just keep going, because this man is a very interesting person, and I just want to learn more. Okay.
Just to give you a little sense of this. In other words, one lecture on Egypt seems probably inappropriate. One lecture on Mesopotamia probably seems like a little too much if you're admitting that's the founding of your civilization. That's a really strange thing. You could do this as an exercise. Try to figure out your favorite musical.
I'm gonna set the timer for 20 minutes because it's I just don't want to get lost in it. And I don't want to make this video too long, so there you go.
Instruments, all of them. And then look at who invented them. About 85–90% of the musical instruments on the planet today were invented by the ancient Egyptians. So if you're into music, like, how can you ignore that? The rest were invented by Persians, although the Mesopotamians invented the bagpipe. Do you want me to say that again? It wasn't the Celts. When the Celts were migrating through Mesopotamia, they heard the bagpipe and they went, "Oh, that is a nice sound." They grabbed it and took it across North Africa and then invaded Europe. One time I had a CD with bagpipe music. I plugged it into my car. I had an Irish friend, Connor, and he was in the car with me, and I said, "Listen to this." And he's like, "This is really strange bagpipe music." And I'm like, does it feel like Ireland? He goes, "Yeah, a little bit." It was Tunisian bagpipe music, because the Tunisians still play the bagpipe, because it never went away, right? So there are exceptions.
It's interesting.
But here's another way of thinking of this. The strangeness of the way the course is taught. It's the equivalent of doing this, having a course on English civilization. And then you're going to make it a 32-week course, because you're going to have a part 1 and a part 2. And of course, English civilization, if you take the moment that the Anglos and the Utes and the Saxons are invading Britain, we're talking about a 1,400-year-old civilization. The point where the Anglos take over is not 1,100 years ago. So I don't know, do you want to do the point where they invaded or the point where they conquered? Pick one, go with it. And then what you do is you cover the first part of English history all the way to 1776 in the first course. And then in the second course, you just, actually no, you wouldn't even cover it in the first, you would do English history in the first course, like the first maybe 2 weeks. And then the rest of the course, you just talk about the United States. You just do 30 weeks of US history. And at the end, if somebody goes, "Wait a minute, I thought this was a course on English civilization," you go, "We are England. We are English civilization." Well, I mean, yeah, we're a piece of English civilization gone rogue, but what about England? No, that's done. They don't do that anymore. They're not English. We're English. Do you see how weird this is? How could Western civilization have been born in Egypt and Iraq and then suddenly vanished after being there for thousands of years that you don't even deign to have a conversation about? When Julius Caesar is massacring the Gauls, Egypt is already 4,000 years old. Right? Egypt had a civil war that went 170 years.
Wow.
The United States is what, 240? 230 something. Depending on, do you start it with the Declaration of Independence or the moment the Constitution went into effect? I've never figured out which one I want. One of those two is right. Right? I mean, Egypt has a sneeze that lasted almost as long as the United States has been around. So that's another weirdness about the conversation that we're going to have tonight, is I need you to reframe the way you think about this. That this civilization that was birthed in the banks of the Tigris, the Euphrates, and the Nile can't possibly have stopped being there. But if you've been listening to the news lately, it gets really interesting, because when Russia invaded Ukraine, all I hear now is Russia almost accepted Western culture. Russia almost accepted Western democracy. The West is supporting Ukraine. West, West, West. It's the old conversation from the Cold War, reborn again. So we got to go back a little bit here before the Cold War to understand some terminology. When the English were conquering the world, when the English were making the world England, they didn't finish, obviously. They didn't finish. They got 40% done, and they ran out of steam. But 40% is amazing. Think about it.
The whole world back then.
Teeny weeny little island where they boil their steak and fry their tomatoes, where it's always raining, somehow conquered 40% of the planet. I still can't wrap my mind around it. They only ruled it for 200 years, but still. I don't know. I don't even know what to make of that. That's talent. There was talent there. I'm not denying the talent. Just incredible talent, because a lot of it wasn't violence, right? The English would plant a flag, and the Indians are looking at it going, what is that? It's a flag. What does it do? It means we conquered you. And the Indians are like, oh, crap. You mean if we had gotten to your tiny little island and planted the Indian flag, we would have conquered you? And the English are like, yep, that's how this works. We got you. So there was a little bit of psyching them out, right? That was also going on. So, when the English had done this, they decided that they needed to make this idea of the East. There needed to be this concept of the East, the other, the nefarious, the sneaky, the mysterious, the strange. And so they came up with this idea of making the East being basically Asia, and then going from there. Now, the Romans had this a little bit, and the Greeks had this a little bit. So it wasn't that the English made it up completely from their own minds. For the Greeks, it was the Persians. For the Romans, it was still the Persians. And so the English kind of had, oh yeah, this worked really well for the Greeks and the Romans. We want to have this for ourselves. So what they did was they named the far end of Asia the Far East. They took the southern middle part of Asia and they called it the Middle East. And then they took the western end of Asia and they called it the Near East because it was near Europe. In other words, what we call the Middle East was the Near East. What we call South Asia was the Middle East. The Near East is what we call the Middle East today. What we call South Asia today was the Middle East. But then the Cold War started. And we Americans went, we can keep this East-West thing going, but now we need the Russians to be the East, because the East is evil, dangerous, and exotic, strange. So we'll make the Russians the new Near East, and we'll do the Eastern Bloc states as the new Near East. But if that's the Near East, then the Middle East can't be the Near East anymore. So we renamed the Near East the Middle East, but then we needed a new name for the old Middle East, so we named it South Asia in our new naming scheme. The Eastern Bloc states and the Soviet Union, it never caught. Nobody started calling that the Near East. But they did call it the East and the Eastern Bloc. In other words, it partially worked. It worked well enough. It got what they wanted. And now, in effect, what they had done was they had successfully divorced East Germany East from Western civilization in the minds of people. But this isn't the first time that somebody has divorced Western civilization from the minds of people. We had already done it to Egypt and Iraq. Right? I just got through showing you that the West was founded in Egypt and Iraq, and yet somehow we believe it's not in the West. In fact, even Middle Easterners will say it's not in the West. It's part of everybody's understanding of the world now. And this is, of course, at the heart of Orientalism, because the goal is to make it seem that the East is irrational. It's inefficient. It's authoritarian. And the West is democratic and liberated. And everybody's happy. It's all about ice cream. We build it into everything. So I don't know if you've ever watched The Man in the High Tower. It's probably not worth watching. The first season is. The first season was really amazing.
Yeah.
But then after that, it kind of falls apart a little bit. And you could tell they just didn't know where to go. But it's about what would have happened if Japan and Germany had won World War II. And so it's really weird watching Americans walking around in SS uniforms, you know, goose stepping around. It's just like, oh, God. So the first season, the whole time you keep thinking, oh, this is horrific. Well, not to ruin the story for you in case you haven't seen it, but at one point, there is a good Japanese, right? That's a fun trope. Good Japanese, bad Japanese, right? We do this all the time. Good Native American, bad Native American. That's how we it's Downton Abbey. Everybody upstairs is wonderful. Some of the people downstairs are wonderful, but some of the people downstairs are not wonderful. Because we all know there are good lower class people, there's scum lower class people, but upper class people are all wonderful. Because the guy who wrote Downton Abbey, of course, is a member of the nobility, and so it's a giant propaganda piece. Just remember, also he villainizes gay people, which is interesting, and Americans like this show so much.
Never seen the Downton Abbey, so can't say much, but the Money High Castle are really good.
I've lost my train of thought.
Yeah, that's often happens with me too.
The Near East, Middle East thing. And then, why did I get into Downton Abbey?
You were talking about Orientalism, the idea that they're trying to make the others the bad guys.
Oh, I know it was. It was the good Japanese, the bad Japanese. There we go. So okay, so there's this good Japanese guy, and he's trying to figure out the mess that they're in. Because the Japanese are controlling California and they can barely hold on to it. Things are falling apart. And they know that the Nazis are coming for them. Because, right, of course they are. It's just, of course, why would you make it ever anything with the Nazis?
Yep.
They're eventually going to come for you. They went for each other, right? The Nazis spent a huge chunk of their time killing each other, trying to move up in rank. So this Japanese guy, I'm trying not to ruin this, but there's a scene where he figures out what would have happened if Japan and Germany hadn't conquered the United States. And what he sees is children licking ice cream. And I thought, really? That's what you went to? That was the big moment, the big breakthrough moment. There's balloons and there's children licking ice cream. That's the difference? That was the qualitative difference that you saw between Nazism and what we have? Surely there's something more. So now I need to get into the conversation of identity, because a part of all of this is identity. So a few years ago, I had a conversation with a Christian Egyptian woman, a Coptic woman. And she said, I'm an Easterner, and we in the East. And I was like, wow, here we go. She's saying, I'm an Easterner. She's embraced this idea. So now we need to get into identity. We do something really interesting with identity. Identity is complicated, and that's part of this problem because it's nested in the concept of Western civilization. So in other words, when I talk about Western civilization, I can't help but also then talk about identity because it plays such a massive role in the way we shape our conversations, the way we understand who we are as individuals, but also what we understand other people to be, because this is part of the otherizing process. So, this identity conversation, I want to bring up something interesting. And it'll seem weird, but when you think about it, it's the right thing to do, especially since I brought up the Irish earlier. Just to be clear, I didn't like that book, How the Irish Saved Civilization. I love the Irish. So when the English start, the next round of the Troubles when they pull Northern Ireland out of the EU and the Irish go no and stuff starts getting blown up and people start getting shot again because the English are idiots and they Brexited, I'm going to be on Ireland's side. I'm outing myself right now. When we talk about American presidents, you will hear people say, Kennedy is the first Irish president.
Oh.
That's an interesting statement because it's a loaded statement. He probably isn't. And the reason I'm saying that is we've had 46 presidents, and 23 of them had Irish ancestry, including Andrew Jackson and James K. Polk and U.S. Grant. Now, I don't think three men walked around.
I wonder where she's gonna go with that, because he is an American. He said this, isn't it? And Americans have this, a lot of Americans, I'm not saying everyone because my husband is example of not doing that. But basically a lot of Americans are saying like, oh, I'm Polish, oh, I'm Irish, or I'm that, and I'm this. But to me, it's not, well, unless you were born in Ireland or in Poland or the country and you emigrated to America, or your parents did that, in my opinion, yeah, they can say that. Because they, you know, like down to the thing, they probably have a lot of contact with the family in the homeland, as they call it, and stuff like that. But Americans say that even if, let's say, they never had any touch with that ancestral country, home country, and they say that, oh, I'm Irish because my great-great-great-grandfather came to America from Ireland in, I don't know, like 150 years ago. To me, that's just being an American with Irish ancestry. So I wonder where is he going with that, if he's gonna kind of say that, because he's obviously talking to mostly Americans there, so let's see.
I'm going, I am Irish American. But then when you say Kennedy's the first Irish president, it's kind of weird, because what are you saying? That because they didn't identify as Irish first, they're not Irish? And what we really mean is Kennedy was the first Catholic president.
That's true as well.
Right? You see what I'm saying? Like, for example, if I told you Reagan was Irish, does that come as a surprise? If you're my age, it probably doesn't, because there was conversation about Reagan being Irish in the 80s, because the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, was also Irish. And so there was this weird thing where there was this Catholic Irish Speaker of the House and this Protestant Irish president, and they were hanging out and friends. And they were friends.
That's 80s.
One was a Democrat, one was a Republican.
Mind, I was born in the 80s, obviously. I don't remember that from the first hand, because I'm too young for that. But I do know from history that basically after moving to Ireland, I kind of, like, obviously got some of the history about Ireland. I'm gonna admit it straight up that I didn't know much about Ireland before I moved to Ireland. So, but I did hear about obviously the Troubles and the IRA, the movies. They came to Poland as well when I was in my teenage years, so I did see those. So obviously I kind of knew, and I know from my coworkers that they lived through that times that it wasn't easy to live here. So, and the Protestant and Catholic thing in Ireland, it's still kind of, maybe not as it used to be, but obviously, oh, this is a Protestant, this is a Catholic. Obviously, in where I am in the Republic of Ireland, Catholics are gonna be the majority, as far as I'm aware, and Protestant wouldn't be as that common, I think. But the other thing is as well, in my case, I'm an atheist, so I don't really care about someone's religion. So yeah, but I know that obviously religion was a very important part of Irish lifestyle back in the day. Still is, although not as much as it used to be. So yeah, so let's see. So having that Irish Protestant president in America, an Irish Speaker of the House that was Catholic, and they were like friends and all, that kind of sounds nice in my opinion. I don't know if I'm making any sense, by the way. Let me know.
But they liked each other, and they got bills passed. They worked together. So there was that conversation. But since then, I doubt very much there's been much of a conversation. In fact, Biden is Irish. He's not only Irish, but it's the United States. After a few generations, nobody's only one thing anyway. You know what I mean? You could try, but y'all ain't gonna succeed. Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, somebody is gonna start mixed breeding. This I promise you. So we don't run around talking about Biden's Irishness. We still don't stop talking about Kennedy's Irishness. In fact, Biden's the second Catholic president. The majority of Americans know this. I think it's 60%. But it's not an important conversation.
It shouldn't be, in my opinion. In my opinion, this is me just talking. The religion of your leader should not take part in anything. Not in the countries like America or Poland. Obviously, there are countries where religion is very important and there is no separation of religion and the state. There is a separation of the religion and the state in America. There is most of European, if not all of European countries, have separation of religion and the government. So in cases where there is separation, clear separation in legislature and stuff like that, religion should not have anything to do who you're voting or who is leading. The leader should be just competent and good. And, oh, that's already 20 minutes? Damn, that was quick. Okay, so let's just watch till another few minutes till he finishes his train of thought maybe, and then we're gonna finish that too.
And in part because we're in a different place, right? The identity stuff has shifted a little bit. The way the identity thing gets to Biden is his religiosity. When Democrats are asked, how religious is he? By the way, the majority of Republicans know he's a Catholic. 55% of Republicans say, yes, Biden's a Catholic. But when people are asked, is Biden religious? 90% of Democrats say yes, he's at least a little religious. 45% of Republicans say yes. In other words, the way we stick identity on people has everything to do with the identity we hold for ourselves. I mean, I guess we could ask Biden. It never occurred to anybody to ask Biden, I guess, because you would think he'd be the expert.
Yeah, on his own thoughts.
Like the fact that we have to survey Americans and they all have an opinion, that's also fascinating to me. Like, how does everybody have an opinion? Did you do research? Did you look it up? How did you form? You know what Biden's religiosity is? How did you figure this out? It's like this mystery. My point is that when we think of people, we stick an identity marker on them, and the identity markers can be really complicated because they can involve nationality, they can involve religion, they can involve race, right? And those identity markers that were important at one point might be not important later on. And so in the mix, when we have a conversation about Western civilization and the West, and then how we think of ourselves, that's what this is also about. And usually when we say the West, we think of Athens and Rome and England and maybe even Germany and France, reluctantly Spain. And even though we think of Rome, we're probably a little iffy about Italy, which is another contradiction in this thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. I'm gonna finish here. We are at 42 minutes mark. Okay. And last time I forgot to change the camera, so yeah. And again, another parts of he's really I think he's really funny as well. And because of that, the information that he's giving are just getting like it's I don't know what I'm trying to say. Information what he's saying is just basically kind of coming in because it's easier for us to get the information when it's in a pleasant manner. And I think he's very pleasant manner, very good talker as well, even that he kind of like veers off from one to another subject when he's trying to say something and explain it. But it's like I said in the last video as well, this is kind of like me trying to explain something as well, and I'm just veering from one thing to another, and I'm sometimes make a mess out of it. But in the end, like he even lost his train of thought there when he was talking about the shows and stuff, and he got from one show to another to just yeah, you know what I mean. Like anyway, as always, that was very good again, and well, I still have more than an hour to watch, so we'll see this one in 2 weeks time, and you're gonna see me tomorrow watching something else. So thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye.